Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching Politics HQ here on News Center Television, broadcasting live to the entire African continent and beyond. Chukwuma Okenwa, Executive Director, Lead Network Africa, is my next guest. Good to see you, Chukwuma, and thanks for your time. It's 31 days to Nigeria's election, and I know you've been following, developments in Nigeria's polity. Tell us how excited or otherwise you are watching proceedings and developments towards this election.
I would not say I am excited because particularly it has to do with the concerns for violence, whether before, during, and after the elections. You know, we see it building up as usual. Already, like right here in the southeast, where I am based, we see like instances of some hoodlums attacking INEC office. This is not a good development. Sometimes also like you have the targets of security officers, and it's not healthy for our polity. Yes, we commend the great gesture of trying to like achieve peace via signing of peace accords. But of course, this would not be the first time. It's been like a culture from 2015 up till now. And there is no evidence anywhere to show that this has actually culminated into the needed result. Because apart from like just mere signing of documents, you know, you talk about peace building, the peace processes, and it has to do with a lot of, with the political actors and the players, you know, ensuring that deep within themselves, they esteem national interest above selfish interest, which we've always seen. And we also know, like in the case of their spokesmen, you know, the spokesmen are their representative. They are the mouthpiece of not just the campaign organization, but they also represent the ideals of the candidate. And we can correctly quote the candidate by quoting the spokesman. And so when you have spokesmen who do not express decorum in all of their conversations, who do not insist on respect for fellow citizens and following the laid down rule for a peaceful and successful electoral process, it somehow throws up our electoral process, you know, into a red alert that if it is not checked will culminate into further violence.
Well, Chukwuma, you know, you started off by talking about security, which is very important, and the story coming from different parts of the country, and the very latest in southeast of the country is something that should worry, citizens of Nigeria. Let us in on what you think about the handling of security, especially till this moment. No one has been arrested and tried for any form of arson on INEC's facility, let alone other forms of crimes and criminalities.
Honestly, I would adjudge the current situation in two ways. It is either there is a complete collapse of intelligence or there is conspiracy by the security officials, maybe more or less like insincerity on their part. Because you cannot talk about like a nation like Nigeria that all of the intelligence organization. You have the National Intelligence Agency, right? And then the other sister agencies also. So how is it that maybe, and of course you have the state security services, and you also have the DIA, so the Defense Intelligence Agency. So with all of these, that means we are not in any short supply when it has to do with agencies to ensure that the real and the most important aspect of security, you know, we are up to speed in it, and that has to do with safety. Because the essence of security is not reactive, it is actually proactive. Your ability to stop, the ability to forestall even those things before they happen. But a country that only reacts, a country that only seeks to bring to book perpetrators, cannot claim to have security. And that is why you cannot talk about security without actually that proactive arm, you know, that has to like evaluate situations, even spot challenges before they come up. But we've not seen this happening. So one would wonder, why is it not happening? Perhaps it could be an indication that someone somewhere is not sincere. And this we must begin to check as a nation so that we are sure that nobody is sabotaging the nation. Because by now we would have expected that at least in up to 5 cases, 3 cases should go unsuccessful for those perpetrators. But in a nation as big as Nigeria and as formidable as Nigeria, you have people do things and they are not caught. The other time, like in Italy, we saw someone that committed a crime 30 years ago. He disappeared, and coming back to the country after 30 years, he was held. Not as if to say those that maybe the police officers that initiated the case then, you could be sure they have all retired. But guess what? There's that coordination, that transmission, that record keeping, and even after 30 years, the man could be brought to book. That is exactly what we are talking about.
Well, Chukwuma, let's leave security for a bit. Let us in on your assessment of the level of campaign so far. Have the political parties been able to engage the electorate to the extent that you think that they've been able to make up their minds on who to cast a ballot for?
It's still an ongoing process, and like we know, one of the very interesting things about this year's election is that for the very first time we're witnessing the emergence of a third force. This before now has been hypothetical, it's been theoretical. People saying, oh, is there a possibility? How soon is it going to happen? But for us to live in a nation where at this point, it is no longer just between APC and PDP, but there's now a third dimension to that conversation. And I think it's one of the most interesting times to actually be in Nigeria, because guess what? It's now breaking it into being like just a 2-horse ride race to a 3-horse ride race. And the most important aspect of this, for the very first time, we begin to see candidates, aside from the usual throw of tantrums, begin to make the electoral campaigns a little bit of ideological. Yeah, some people have actually criticized the newest move, what I call maybe the Chatham pilgrimage, of every candidate actually going to Chatham House, to speak from that particular platform. But whatever, anybody may want to say, I personally feel like it's an advancement in our polity for people to come to the point where we can actually discuss. Yes, sadly not on Nigeria soil, but this is just happening for the very first time, where any candidate that believes that you are a contender and not a pretender, you come to a global stage. Sure, Nigerians are listening. Both Nigerians in the UK and Nigerians everywhere. People follow those conversations. And I think it's exciting to know that our leaders, those that want to be our leaders, could, make our time to come up with ideas, share the ideas on the global stage. So that's quite commendable.
And Chukwuma, another aspect has to do with the first-time voters. That's a big one going into this election. Yes,
that's quite commendable, and a lot of political pundits have judged that to some of the characteristics of a third force, right? To make up for the newest entry. Some pundits are judged that as that those before now who never had any reason, to vote, have probably found an expression in a candidate and are now inspired to get their voter's card. But of course, at the end of the day, the results will tell us whether that was mere hypothesis or there lies an evidence in some of those propositions.
Speaking of, propositions, that is still within campaigns and promises and even manifestos. How excited are you looking at the conversations with the electorates? The manifestos are out there, and some have also accused each other of duplicating or stealing their ideas. What readily comes to mind has to do with ideologies of these parties. Chukwuma.
Okay, yeah. Let me say something which is really very, very interesting. At the moment, political parties in Nigeria, it's not largely not ideological. And what I mean by that, oftentimes when we talk about ideology in political conversation, many simply interpret ideology as a manifesto, but it's entirely 2 different things. When you talk about ideology, ideology actually answers the question of, not the question of what or how, but who. Ideology actually answers the question of who is this party meant for. A case study of the United States of America, when we talk about the Republicans, you are talking about conservatives. When you talk about Democrats, you are talking about liberals. And all across the globe where you have like democracy, when you mention a particular political party, we want to know what is the philosophy of those that this is meant for. So what is ideology all about? Yes, everybody wants well for the country. Everybody want to achieve a certain aim, but then the means and the ways with which they want to go about it differs. So let me give a case study, like in terms of raising up children. Based on the way we are raised up, people grow up with different ideologies. So you could come up from a background where the ideology is that for you to actually raise up a responsible child, you need to flog the child, you need to trash that child. Another person believes that for you to raise up a responsible child, you need to advise the child, you need to be close to the child, you don't need to use maybe like the cane. These are ideologies, but guess what? These two systems can actually produce responsible children. The most important thing is now justifiably using your own system to create the desired result, and that is what ideology is meant for. So, but today, if I ask you, who is PDP meant for? Who is APC meant for? How does APC want to like address the issue of foreign policy, issue of security, issue of economy? Can anybody be able to tell me like how those parties actually differ from themselves, apart from saying we are going to create these million jobs, we are going to do this, we are going to do that? I do not see ideology in the things they do, because clearly ideology should be able to say, like in the US, where maybe a Democrat takes over power, it's all about globalization policies. If it's a Republican, you talk about America first, you talk about nationalistic agenda, and at such times, even like getting a US visa becomes a little bit tough, because you are talking about like shortening of the borders. So there is like clarity, but guess what? The interesting thing about this is that, as the US have seen it, is that when a Democrat finishes, there will be a need for a Republican to balance of what the Democrats have started, and with that, you can actually appreciate the fact that you have like parties having opposing view. But in our own instance, I could say APC is PDP, and PDP is APC, and because of lack of ideology, that is why it's easy for somebody to switch from one party to another. Because just imagine how difficult it is to switch from being a Christian to Muslim or vice versa. That's what ideology is. Ideology basically answers the question of who, not what, not how.
And is there a way we can actually rejig the democratic space to ensure that there is a stop to such, system where there are no ideologies, and better system of political ideologies in the future?
Yeah, I think it really calls for like a sort of like a retreat for those parties, a solemn assembly to actually ask themselves. It's just like even like as a nation, in developed nations, they talk about their dreams. A little boy in America understands when we talk about the American dream. Till date, as a nation that have existed for years, if I ask you as an adult, what is the Nigerian dream, you'll be confused. So I think this issue also started like even from the founding fathers, the way we've been doing things, and even interesting to note that at this particular point as a nation, the way even people get our international passport, anybody can claim Nigeria citizenship. The reason is very simple. For almost over 60 years, we existed as a nation without registers, without the national identification number, which should be like the one that you can use to authenticate all other, who actually like is a citizen. But we existed successfully for years. Many Nigerians were moving around without anything to identify or to authenticate that they are citizens. And it's an error. So if those parties actually will get it wrong, when you take a 1,000 steps into the wrong direction and discover that's not the right way, you have to go back to retrace your step. So once the parties are able to answer the question of who is PDP meant for, who is APC meant for, I believe that will go a very long way in defining who becomes their members and also how sustainable this membership would be.
You know, Chukwuma, one other thing that I had a conversation with Kunle a little moment ago, and we discussed the sensitization, you know, level of sensitization for the electorate. I want us to go back looking at that, which is almost not too good, going by the kind of voting Nigerians will be having in this election. There's the BVAS, there is an electoral act, and there's a little bit of rejigging the process leading up to this election. How well have we managed, you know, the education of our voters on the day? Hello, Chukwuma, are you there?
I'm back. Sorry about I think there was this, yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Well, Chuks, I can hear you. I'm talking about, now you're back, well, good thing you're back. Let's talk about the voter awareness leading up to this election.
Okay. Well, I think in terms of voter awareness, it's still very, 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 very poor. A lot needs to be done, and I think it's not just what can merely be achieved towards election season. And I think that is the mistake that the departments responsible in INEC is making all of the time. That is also the mistake that the National Orientation Agency is making all of the time. You see, we have an agency that is paid by the government to give people orientation on how they can align with policies of the government, with policies of citizenship. But we don't see that happening. It's more or less like a fanfare towards election cycle. You could have like maybe 1 or 2 persons trying to go into like a place, captured just for the news, and then just to give an impression that they are doing well too. You know, at that particular point where there is noise everywhere, that would not be the best time to actually convince a citizen that the vote is actually the voice, and under whatever guise should one's vote be sold. And the moment we actually institutionalize the process of learning, process of educating the citizen, because the most important aspect of education is the political education, right? And unfortunately, we lack that in our system, because sometimes even, yes, gladly that the federal government has introduced civic education at all levels. But then sometimes also you have the challenge of those to teach the subject in such a way that learners can actually appreciate that. But how about those that are not educated, you know, school citizens? That is where the INEC department charged with voter education, and of course, the National Orientation Agency comes in to educate people at that local level, right? Getting to them, you know, liaising with the royal fathers, the traditional rulers, and communicating this information in the way that we actually learn. Because at that local level, what people just know is, oh, this is where our leader, maybe the royal father say, or maybe like some person that came to share maybe 1 or 2 things. This is the person they say we should vote for. Why are you going to vote this person? They don't know. And with this level, you know, with those number of people massively voting when they do not even understand the import of their vote, I mean, it spells danger for our democracy. Because democracy is not just a function of numbers, but quality numbers will actually influence the emergence of the quality candidates to actually deliver on quality dividends.
Well, Chukwuma, let's see if we can close on this. And I go back to where we started off from, talking about security specifically. Let's place this on Nigeria's southeast region, which you're very familiar with. What's the reading, especially as the country prepares for an election?
So
what have you been able to gather about security situation in the southeast?
At the moment, just like an example, yesterday we are still at home. Today again we are still at home. And the reason was there was a WhatsApp message that went viral threatening people not to come out. So it has actually come to a point in the Southeast where anybody, anywhere, just come up with a message and people are scared to come out to do their business. The Southeast at the moment, it's like a red alert, a red security alert. And I think the government and all security agencies know what to do. But then it does appear that the situation at the moment may be designed to actually favor the cause of some people, because I do not understand why the federal government at this point, despite the cries, to actually address some of those agitations leading to the current situation in the Southeast, the federal government has chosen to give a deaf ear. That is not what we expect of a father. So this is a call to President Muhammadu Buhari to do the needful. Yes, we recall a time when the elders from the Southeast called him to explore political situation, to douse the tension in the Southeast. And he said at the moment that the only solution was the legal solution, right? And then we now have the court come up to say, we are actually, discharging the culprit. And the government began to give another definition of, discharge. Oh, he was discharged and not acquitted. And I mean, that's like swindling the citizens just to like push some personal interest, which is not really in the best interest of the nation.
Chukwuma Okenwa, Executive Director, Lead Network Africa. Many thanks for speaking with us on Politics HQ.
Thank you.
We'll take a moment and we will be back. Well, the United Kingdom wants Nigerian and Ghanaian teachers. That's a big demand, we understand. And they'll go, like my people on the continent will say, who no like better thing. Now, first, we lose doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals. Our hospitals are filled with patients waiting on a very few doctors to attend to them. The doctors are frustrated, the nurses are angry, and the teachers poorly paid, and we hear their reward is in heaven. What do you do when you find some reward on earth? You go if you can afford it. But how does Nigeria grow from here? The builders of our society are leaving in search of greener pastures. Who will teach our children? Nigeria, this time, we must be told, does not have enough teachers. We're told we have enough doctors, even when it is a doctor to 10,000 patients. There are very few teachers in Nigeria. Go to public schools and see what's obtainable. In private schools, they seek better rewards also, and now that the UK is here again to fill its weaknesses with Nigeria's even weaker state, what's next? The Nigerian government must learn to reward its professionals accordingly, or else the rest of the world will poach as they currently are doing. When teachers leave in droves, what remains of the learning institutions, especially as some youth don't like the classroom these days? A whole lot needs to be done, and that is why even politicians have left the local podiums to Chatham House and speak, leaving the NIIA, that is, the African and Nigerian podium. There's something for you to actually think about. If you will, chew on it. I'm Sulaiman, many thanks for being such nice company.